Okay. I'm not sure why mine is showing up as Delane, but maybe I can make a name change real quick.
Mine did that too. I think it's just that everyone shows up as Delane when they.
Okay.
But if you go to the
My fault.
no, I love it. I'll take it. I'll be Delane.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'll be Delane too.
Self as fuck. If you go to the top left hand side of your picture with the three dots, you can go down to rename. No, that was it.
Okay. Yeah, I know what you're speaking of, but I don't have
Let me
that
see.
on
I
here
think
for some odd reason.
I might be able to do it too. Let's see. Yep. Which one? Nicholas. Which one?
We can do Nick.
Nick. Okay. Want last name?
Nah,
Okay.
do Nick.
Perfect. Okay. Hey, hey, Kiana. I know you had a presentation. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I do.
Do you know how to share your screen? Do you want to share your screen for it?
Okay, I can be. I can. I just wanted to know if I had the ability to share my screen.
You should. Let me know if you don't.
Okay, let me see. Yep, I do right here.
Perfect.
Okay.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're going to get started in about 3 minutes, so stay tuned.
Hey folks, thank you for joining and being on time. We are here for the National Bailout. We are here for the National Bailout Advocacy webinar as part of the Black Mamas Bailout webinar series. And this evening, we are going to be talking to some folks that are part of our collective and throw down with us each year and ensure that we not only get our folks out, but keep them out and keep them free. So super excited to be speaking to y'all tonight. And we're going to about 2 more minutes, and then we are going to Cool. So let's do it. Welcome again, folks. Again, this is the National Bailout webinar call, part of the Free Black Mamas and Black Mamas Bailout webinar series, which is a weekly webinar series that we've been doing for the past few weeks as part of our Free Black Mamas Bailout campaign, and to really give folks technical assistance and insight into the bailout work, and hopefully use this as, where folks can hopefully use this as a tool. Tonight specifically, we will be speaking with our lovely panelists from Law for Black Lives, Michigan Liberation, Plan Nevada, and Free Black Mamas DMV, who will be talking and discussing how bailouts have been connected to larger campaigns to end pretrial detention, exploring threats to non-reformists, speaking about non-reformist reforms, and sharing the different tactics and tools that they have used to get our folks free and to keep them out, such as court watch and participatory defense. And then discussing a larger framework, particularly about how we are organizing and what we're grounded in, that extends beyond the bailout work. So that is pretty much an overview of what we'll be discussing. And for those of you who are new to these calls, my name is Arissa Hall, my pronouns are she and hers, and I am the project director of National Bailout. And for those of you who are not super familiar with the work of National Bailout, welcome and glad that you are here. And to just do a brief overview into the work that we do and who we are a Black collective of organizers and lawyers and culture workers and magic makers who have built a community-based movement to end pretrial detention. And we started that, and our most notable tactic has been Black Mamas Bailout, which started in 2017, and which continues now, and which we're continuing to gear up for, especially for next week. It has resulted in the release of over 400 folks from cages in the past 3.5 years. So super excited to talk about that work and talk about how the work that you'll be exploring and hearing today is an extension of that. And to speak about extensions, not only do we bail out Black moms and caregivers because that is what we do, we also have some strategic priorities that is based on our vision and our abolitionist collective's vision to end mass criminalization and pretrial detention. And so our strategic priorities is to continue to bail out Black mamas and caregivers, because obviously that is what we do. And that is the way that we get our people out and free ASAP and change their material conditions. Our second priority is to build a political community with the folks that we bail out. And we've been doing that through providing supportive services to folks, and also for the past 2 years through our fellowship program. Our third priority is to basically offer thought leadership, which is what this call is, and to just assert ourselves as the experts of our experience as Black people. And we've also done that through the creation of resources and tools such as our Until Freedom Comes Toolkit, which is also downloadable on our website, and where you'll also have some nuggets around advocacy and organizing around pretrial detention and in the money bail. So that is who we are, that is what we do. And again, super excited and grateful that y'all decided to join us on a Wednesday evening. So just really quickly to introduce who's on the call, and then I'm going to pass it to our first panelist. But we have my lovely coworker, Elaine, who's on the call, who's supporting with notes and answering our questions and doing all of the things. And we also have Marbury Staley Butts of Law for Black Lives, also a founding organization and member of the National Bailout Collective. And we have Kiana Johnson from Free Black Mamas DMV. And we have Nicholas Buckingham from Michigan Liberation out in Detroit. And we have Leslie Turner from Plain Nevada. So these are going to be the folks that are going to be sharing their wisdom and knowledge with you. And thank y'all all for joining. And I am going to kick it off to Marbury to give us an introduction and the grounding.
Thank you so much, Arissa, and thank you, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be with y'all tonight. So as Arissa mentioned, my name is Marbury. I use she and her pronouns. I'm with Law for Black Lives, which is an organization that organizes lawyers and legal workers to support radical movements from across the country. And we're really proud to be one of the founding members of MBO and to support the incredible work that organizations on this call and beyond are doing to free our people. So I'm going to talk for just 10 or so minutes and really want to do kind of three major things. One is to talk a bit about the politics and the policy priorities of the National Bailout Collective. And we are, of course, as Arissa mentioned, as you all know, a collection of different groups from across the country who are all working locally to end the use of cages, but also the wider prison industrial complex. And so I'm going to talk a bit about kind of our origins and our commitment to what is a transformative legal and policy and organizing project. And then a bit about the abolitionist groundings of our organization. And so most of the groups in National Bailout are abolitionists. I'm going to share what that means to us and why that's so important, and a bit about what types of policy reforms, what types of advocacy cement and build on abolition versus those that may not, that may actually legitimize the system as it is. So talk a bit about kind of abolitionist reforms and what that looks like, and then a bit about some of our concerns about current reforms. And so we're seeing a lot of reforms happen across the country, both in this COVID-19 moment, but also more generally, because mostly of the amazing work of Black folks. But many of those reforms are being co-opted. And to talk a bit about some of our major concerns around current reforms and how we're fighting back, and then end a bit around our values and some of this kind of the key campaigns, in addition to the ones you'll hear about tonight, that are happening in the MBO ecosystem. So that's what's up. That is my plan. I'll start really quickly by saying National Bailout, kind of its origin story is in a convening that was held to really think about and talk about how do we intervene in the bail landscape. So I think for over the last 5 or so years, we've seen a lot of work happening locally to end money bail, to change pretrial detention, to reduce incarceration. But I think many of us noticed a few things about these reforms that were really concerning to us. Number one, we noticed that many of them were actually legitimizing the system. So things like the use of surveillance, like the privatization of pretrial services, like the move of supportive services into corrections agencies, like risk assessments. Each of these reforms, although like talked about as reforms and often claimed as wins, in fact are legitimizing the current pretrial system and legitimizing the use of ankle shackles, the use of making cages out of our homes, legitimizing the use of putting people inside of cages sometimes. And so one of the kind of things we talked about is how do we actually intervene in what is ongoing reforms that are actually legitimizing or strengthening the current system. We also noticed that a lot of reforms were being done in the name of our people, of Black people, but were actually benefiting white folks or other folks. And so a lot of reforms, even as we saw decreases in incarceration, we saw increases or steady rates of Black incarceration. And so lots of these reforms left behind Black folks for all sorts of reasons, often because we weren't at the table to help make the reforms. And then lastly, they ignored kind of the gender dynamics of incarceration. And so they very often left out women, trans folks out of these conversations about who these systems impacted. And so National Bailout really, with the invitation from Mary Hooks to do Mama's Day bailouts and the work of countless other folks to make that happen, was about how do we interrupt what we see as reformist reforms, or reforms that really reenact and retrench and re-legitimize these systems, and how do we instead make sure we're actually creating the space for transformation inside of these systems. And so I think we saw the bailouts as a tactic, and I think we say this a lot, not as an ends of themselves, but a tactic for three key things. One was to call attention to the ways that these systems are destroying our people, and then in fact, we are putting our mamas, our brothers, our sisters inside of these cages. So really to call attention to the humanness of these, of who's inside of cages, and to get ourselves free inside of those. Secondly was to learn the systems. And so anyone who's done a bailout knows that you become incredibly well versed in how these systems work, in all the ways that they're super messed up, and in how we might fix them. And so to really become experts in the problem by gathering our people. And then lastly, by really building the muscles for how we can create alternatives to these systems. And so a lot of the work that's happening is supportive service infrastructure building, is imagining an abolitionist future without cages and jails. And so a huge piece of why I think the bailouts become so important, also why policy and advocacy is at the heart of so much of what we do, is because many of us are abolitionists. And so when I say abolitionists, what I mean by that is that we believe in the end of cages, the end of cops, the end of surveillance, and the end of the prison industrial complex, which is the very kind of heavy web of everything from police surveillance to police officers, to cages, to detention centers, to the profiteering of all those systems that we see throughout the country and throughout the world. And so we actually want to see the abolition of the end of those systems. We don't believe that cages cure problems. We don't think cages keep our people safe. We say that both as survivors of folks who have been survivors of violence and survivors of cages, right? That we know from both sides of that coin that in fact, the use of prison, the use of cages, the use of violence against our people will not get us free, and it doesn't keep us safe. And so, I think this is the same that often Rachel Horsing and folks in critical resistance say, but abolition is as much about what it is that we are building as what we're destroying. And so although a huge piece of abolition is about divestment from jails and prisons, divestment from police, divestment from surveillance, there also is a huge piece about what we actually are building in its place. And so what are we imagining to keep our people safe, to keep our people whole and free from harm? And so a lot of the work of the bailouts is both about divesting from these systems, making them illegitimate, getting our people out of cages literally, but it also is about what we are building to replace these systems as we fight for a different kind of world. And I think many of us understand abolition as an inheritance from our ancestors, that we know the fight for the abolition of slavery was never ended, that we continue to see iterations of the same logics, the same profiteering in the prison industrial complex that we saw in slavery, and the same racial discrimination. And so we really understand that we've taken on the mantle of our ancestors, and that these bailouts and the policies and advocacies that we're doing around the bailouts are a continuation of our ancestors' fight for freedom. And then until we see the end of these systems, that freedom will be impossible and elusive. So I think a lot of the work that we support of the national bailout groups and that Law for Black Lives does is really work that's grounded in what we call abolitionist or non-reformist reforms. And these are changes or policy changes that I think meet four major criteria. One is that they actually improve the material conditions of our people, that when we finish them, when we win them, our people are better off than they were before we started the fight. And so the bailouts, the end of money bail, the end of pretrial detention, all of that will improve the conditions of our people in material ways. So that's the first criteria. The second is that it shifts power. And this I think is a really important one, that very often reforms actually entrench power in the same judges and sheriffs and decision makers that originally had it. And so a big piece of abolitionist reforms is that they actually move power from the sheriffs and the judges into the hands of the folks who are actually experts in these systems, which is us and our communities. And so really seeing a shift of power as part of how we win abolitionist reforms. thought is that abolitionist reforms or non-reformist reforms shrink the cost for a state. So they take money, they take legitimacy, they take human power out of the cost for a state. They reduce the budgets, they reduce the footprint of the state. And so I think many of the reforms that we're seeing right now that happen in terms of bail, for instance, increase the corrections of the budgets of the corrections office to hold pretrial services. That's an example of a reform that we wouldn't support, because we deeply believe that any reform that's effective has to actually be shrinking this system as we go. And then lastly, abolitionist reforms create new possibilities. So they create new avenues, new ways to imagine these systems. They create new pathways for folks to support each other, and new ways for people to be in leadership. And so they really open up new possibilities for our people to imagine what it might look like to hold each other accountable and to be safe from harm in the long term. And so much of the work that the folks in the National Bailout Collective and the L4BL and other folks do really embrace these principles of shifting power, of improving material conditions, of shrinking the system, and of creating new possibilities as really at the heart of how do we make sure that we're actually pushing for reforms that move us in the right direction. And part of the reason why we've been so incredibly committed to thinking about what abolitionist reforms look like is because we see so many reforms that are being passed or that are being suggested that we see as really detrimental and really dangerous. And so I'm going to just name a few of these. I think these have happened across the country locally, that as politicians are responding to a really incredible call for pretrial reform, they often are doing reforms that actually entrench their power and that put our people in more danger. And so one of the things that we're seeing across the country that we're really fighting hard against is the use of risk assessments. And so risk assessments literally have been implemented in almost every single jurisdiction or city or town or state that has embraced any type of bail reform has also embraced risk assessments. And risk assessments are a tool that's used to determine if somebody should, in quotes, be kept in a cage or not. And it uses factors like, what is your zip code? Did you finish high school? Do you have a job? And we know that all of these facts are deeply tied to systemic racism, right? And so your zip code is a product of redlining. If you have a job, it's a product of discrimination in the employment sector. If you finished high school, it's a product of the school-to-prison pipeline. And so over and over again, we see these risk assessments using data that is deeply, deeply racist because of long histories of racial inequality and discrimination in this country, and then using that to justify keeping our people locked up. And so I think we see risk assessments as a real threat. It also uses quote unquote science, and so these algorithms, to justify the incarceration and the caging of Black people specifically. And we've seen across the country, from the use in Kentucky to New Jersey, that these tools actually increase the incarceration of Black folks and then use a scientific excuse to justify that incarceration. And so we see these as illegitimate and really dangerous tools. We don't think that our people are risks. We think that the failure of these systems to provide for the needs of our people is actually the problem. And so Law for Black Lives and Frontline Healers, along with SONG and other groups and MBO, have been working for the last year to develop what we call needs assessment tools, to actually assess what are the needs that our people have, how do we meet those, as opposed to using these costly tools that are really fake science to justify disproportionate incarceration of Black folks. So that's one of the reforms that we see as really dangerous. And whenever we see risk assessment, we really have a lot of questions and concerns about how it's going to get implemented, and just the reality that it becomes an excuse to lock up all people over and over again using bad data. The second major concern that we have around advocacy that's happening is privatization. And so over and over again, in almost every city and state that's done bail reform, we also see the expansion of private industries for profit. And so this includes everything from drug tests and pretrial services that people who are accused of crimes have to pay for out of their own pocket, to electronic shackling they also have to pay for. And so we've seen this rise of the pretrial landscape as a place for folks to make profit. And we see that it's really dangerous. And so have across the board called for no profiteering inside of incarceration and the pretrial setting, that in fact it creates really bad incentives and is a dangerous place for folks to profit, that we are not, that just like we oppose slavery, that we are not objects of profiteering, and that should not be part of this system. The third reform that I think we've been pushing hard against in our different organizations is preventative detention. And so even as we've seen a decrease in the use of money bail, we actually have seen an increase in the use of preventative detention, which is when people are just locked up with no escape or no way out. And so we've moved all demand from one of ending money bail to one of ending pretrial detention, because we don't think anyone belongs in a a cage. And we're seeing over and over again that counties and cities are putting more and more folks in cages with no option out, not even a money option. And so when we say the end of money bail, what we want to see is the end of cages for our people, and that's an expansive demand. And so we're seeing over and over again that when we make demands that are too limited, our opposition takes advantage of that, and so it's like, oh cool, you can have that, but watch this. And so they often will end up locking up more of our people, more Black people, using preventive detention. And so that's something we've really been pushing hard against. The last thing I'll mention is surveillance. This is especially important in this COVID-19 moment. But over and over again, we're seeing that people, that governments, that cities, that judges are making jails out of people's homes. And so forcing folks to wear ankle shackles, to be surveilled as an alternative to incarceration. But we actually know and demand that in fact, putting an ankle shackle on somebody is making a jail of their home. It is not an alternative to incarceration. That's not what we actually want or need. And so I think one thing that we've seen is a huge increase in the use of surveillance technology as we've seen bail reform. And so for us, this is a huge area of just demanding that in fact, our people don't need to be caged in their homes either, that they need to be free. And that caging people in their homes via electronic shackling not only makes it hard for folks to interact with people they love, it also makes it hard for you to keep a job, that all of the same problems we're seeing with actual physical cages are also being manifested when people make cages of people's homes. And so that's a lot of the work that I think we're pushing against, and the campaigns across the country that we've been supporting are also pushing against. Early on, National Bailout came up with kind of 9 key values. I'm gonna put them in the chat box just so folks can look at them, and I won't read them all, but they really all tied to this idea of abolition. And this idea that actually what we are seeking is not just the end of money bail, pretrial detention, but we actually want to see the destruction of these systems that for so long have held our people hostage and have been used to exploit our people economically. And so we see these as deeply connected systems, and we're calling for an end, not just to bail, but we see bail as an entryway to this conversation about why our cage is necessary and the ways that cages are destroying not just individuals, but entire families and communities. And so the policies include things like bail being a first step, not a last step. It also includes things like really not wanting to create false dichotomies between like violent and non-violent. So very often we see reforms that say, okay, we'll let all the folks who are accused of low-level drug offenses out, but everyone else has to stay in a cage. And we don't think cages are helpful for anybody, and we think that those are really false dichotomies. And so pushing to leave nobody behind it. So often advocates are asked to compromise some of our people to get other of our people free. And so really pushing ourselves to demand that everyone free them all, and that we won't throw anyone under the bus to get some of our folks out, that in fact we're committed to a holistic strategy that doesn't devalue any of our people. Another value that we talk a lot about is that we want policies that take money and power away from the system. And so again, very often, I think we are like coerced into thinking that we have to give up money or power to corrections or DAs or different offices. But in fact, we think reforms that are worth fighting for are reforms that make money, that move money out of the system and keep it out of the system. Another demand or another value that we have is around surveillance. And so we reject any reforms that increase surveillance for our people, that we already see the slippery slope that this becomes, that literally cages are being made out of homes, and we will not support reforms that increase surveillance. We also reject reforms that allow any companies to profit off of the incarceration of our people. And this again is in line with our abolitionist values, that we don't think that any space that creates more profiteering is actually a really dangerous one that escalates incarceration in different ways. And then we also are committed to not only the end of pretrial detention, but also immigration detention and all forms of captivity of our people. And so, again, we'll share these values out. I don't know how to put them in the chat box, but we'll figure it out. But these are values that I think groups in MBO came up with to really guide our policy work, because so often policy work and advocacy is about compromise, and we want to be really clear about what we are not willing to compromise on. I'll say really quickly that I think there are 4 or 5 kind of major fights that MBO groups are participating in that I think many of y'all are also participating in. One of those is ending pretrial detention. So from California to New York, we've seen long fights at the state and the city level to really end pretrial detention and money bail. We also are fighting for the implementation of needs assessment tools, and so working across the country to create new models where we can actually make sure our people have what they need. and aren't criminalized. We're also working on invest-divest fights, and so fights to really shift city budgets. In our upcoming report, we detail the city budgets of 12 cities, and a majority of those cities spend twice as much in some cases on things like caging folks and cops as they do on supportive services, on things like healthcare or parks and recreation. And so we see over and over again that all cities are choosing to spend money on criminalizing our people as opposed to supporting our people. And so across the country, folks are involved in fights to really shift resources at the city and state level from incarceration and the carceral state to supportive services. Folks are also engaged in fights across the country to close down jails. And so we had a huge win in Los Angeles, shout out to Union Power Now and the groups there, to stop the building of a new jail. Folks in Miami, Detroit, hoping Nick will talk about this, California and New York have all also been in these fights. And so I think the bailouts invite a wide range of different types of advocacy that really is about, number one, shifting the system, like shrinking the system, making it smaller, creating new opportunities for us to heal and support each other, and thinking about different ways that we spend our money and we put our kind of budgets. So I'll stop there. I think that was a lot. So thank you all so much. And looking forward to any questions and also other folks' presentations.
Thank you, Marbre. We did have a question, a clarifying question around preventative detention, or I don't know if Alejandra, you wanted to just speak to what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. So preventive detention is the use of, so for instance, if you are charged with something and the judge says, we're just going to keep you locked up to prevent you from harming anybody until your trial. And so as opposed to offering somebody bail or saying like, oh, you can pay this much to get out, it's actually just a blanket detention of you until your trial happens or starts. And what it does is it makes people not eligible for bail. And so there's really no way to get out, that we can't raise the funds for you, that you're actually being held without any options for release until your trial. What happens 99% of the time is that people are then forced to plead guilty to crimes they may not have committed to get a plea bargain to try and get out. And so we see, for instance, here in New York, that folks are being held on preventive detention when there's no availability of bail whatsoever, and so there's no bail options. It's not even that it's high, it's that you can't get it. So it's to prevent, they say, future crimes, but in fact, it's a way to hold people with no option to get out.
Thank you. Thank you. Alejandra says thank you as well. Cool. So we are going to pass it to our other panelists, and then we're also going to leave time at the end for any additional questions or thoughts that folks want to share. Because as y'all are seeing, this is a very rich information. So going to pass it off to Kiana to talk about the work that they are doing in DMV. Hey, Kiana.
Hey. Thank you all for having me. My name is Kiana, and I am the Executive Director of Life After Release, but also a core member of the Free Black Mamas DMV coalition here in Maryland, DC, and Virginia. And so I'm going to go ahead and go right to my presentation, if that's okay, because I don't want to hold us up past our time. I think I only got 10 minutes. So let me figure out how to share my screen, and I can go from there. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. And so just a little bit about, today we're talking about how we are doing our work and how we are connecting it to campaigns and to advocacy across the country, more particularly in the DMV. And I'm just gonna start off by explaining what we are and what we do. So the DMV Free Black Mamas Collective is a collective that is made up of several different abolitionist organizations.
Kiana, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Folks are having a hard time hearing you, and I know on my end, it's like a popping noise when you speak.
Oh, okay. Okay, is that any better?
That's better for me. Is it, Nick, you said that's better.
Is it better? Okay, I'll try to speak up as well.
Okay.
So yeah, so the Free Black Mamas DMV is a coalition that is made up of several different abolitionist organizations or collectives, grassroots collectives. And here we are from our last year's bailout that we did, and just some pictures to kind of show our work that we did. We do have a website. Our website is freeblackmamas.com, and you can go there and see our website. Hold on. Okay. Can you all still see my screen? I'm trying to get to the next slide. Okay. So the D in the DMV, Free Black Mamas DMV, stands for the Washington, D.C. area. Right now in the Washington, D.C., we haven't done any bailouts in DC since we started the collective, but we have done some actions around folks, around mamas that are caged in the District of Columbia.
I can't hear you, Kiana. I can hear you now, I think.
You sure? Can y'all hear me?
Try it now.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, I don't know why I'm going in and out. So in the District of Columbia, there isn't any cash bonds, so to speak. There's something called unsecured bonds that judges use to secure that folks will come back to court. So we really much do kind of like actions in the DC area when it comes to bailing folks out, bailing mamas out in DC. We don't really do any actual bonds. So here is just the different types of bonds in DC that we do: signature bonds, cash bonds, which is very seldomly used, citation release, and surety bonds. In the District of Columbia, there's a very strong pretrial operation in which folks are usually released. And in DC, this has been happening for like the last 20 years. So we're focusing in on basically trying to close down the halfway houses that are in DC and trying to get folks free that way. And I'll talk a little bit more about the efforts in DC as I move forward. The M in DMV stands for Maryland. And right now in Maryland, we have Prince George's County, Montgomery County, Charles County, Howard County, Anne Arundel County, Baltimore County, and Baltimore City. Those are the places that we are attempting to get our people free in the state of Maryland. There's 24 counties in Maryland, but those are the areas that we're focusing in on in Maryland right now. In Virginia, we have yet to do a bond. We are actually working with Surge in Virginia to try to see if we can get a bond for Mama's Day this year. But as of right now, we have not had a Virginia bond that we can say that we have been able to do. But we are working on getting the V in the DMV and bailing folks out there. So how do we bail folks out? Pre-trial, we basically are doing, making sure that we get the consent and we do capacity. We have a Google form that we give to the public defenders and to the lawyers to make sure that we are getting consent from folks. And then we work with the families and the public defenders and the lawyers to get those needs assessments filled out. And then we work with the family to kind of like establish a rapport with the loved ones who we want to bail out, so that we make sure that we are in a place where we are going to be able to bail them out and also make sure that they have support. Post bail, we are providing 6 months transitional housing and support. We're providing training / fellowships and skill sharing. We're providing job clubs and employment. We help them to develop a reentry plan. We also work with parole and probation to give support. We obtain or help to obtain Social Security cards, birth certificates, and ID. We also help out a lot with transportation. One key part of our work that we do at Free Black Mamas DMV that connects to our campaign work is our participatory defense work. I will say that in last year, out of the 16 folks that we bailed out last year, over half of those cases were dropped. And that was largely in part that we were going to court with folks, making sure folks were getting back to their court dates, and going over discovery with folks and just doing participatory defense model that is the model from Debug. And then we just connect them to organizing work and stay connected with folks. So it's very important that we're just not bailing folks out, but it's a holistic approach that we are able to connect folks to organizing work that we're doing both in DC and in Maryland. So particularly we are in the COVID season, and the COVID bailouts that we have, or efforts that we have done in DC, because remember in DC there is no real cash bond system that is operating in DC right now. So we have to find other creative ways to do actions and to be able to decarcerate DC. In February, we were able to give out hygiene products and supplies to the Fairview Women's Halfway House. In March, we did a caravan to release loved ones from DC cages. And as a direct result of that, we were able, and other advocacies that's being done in DC, we were able to actually have Hope Village, which is the largest transitional house in the country. We were able to get, as of April the 30th, which is today, it will be closed. It will no longer be open. So that was a win in being able to. That's still a cage. You know, being in a halfway house, although you're not in a prison, so to speak, you are still in a cage. And so we were able to, through advocacy, be able to get that closed down in DC. So here's just some pictures on the side about, you know, that action that we did, and the Department of Corrections in the District of Columbia. So in Prince George's County, our bailout for COVID has been very strong. We have had some ongoing efforts with our state's attorney, Aisha Braveboy. In September, she said that her office would be ending cash bail. I didn't complete that part, that it will be ending cash bail, but we knew that that was not necessarily true. So immediately after that, we, along with Color or Change, developed a court watching program. And that was a little bit before COVID happened. And then in February 2020, we formed a coalition and launched the End of the Secrecy campaign, calling on the state's attorney's office to reveal her policies around bail. And then in April 2020, right after the COVID kind of started and we weren't getting the responses that we needed from her, we worked with the Civil Rights Court to file a lawsuit against Upper Marlboro Jail that was basically an injunction and also a stay away order for the folks in the jail against the jail, so to force them to release them. So that is basically what we're doing, and I'm just going to play this little small video of the folks that were able to get released. Cindy is 18 years old, and we were able to get her.
This video to thank you guys so much for bringing me home, for paying for my bond and getting me out of a jail, which was quite an experience. And I'm very thankful for you guys, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much. Bye.
And then Cindy was 18 years old. Cindy was actually in a situation where her stepfather did something to her and they got into an altercation. So it was an assault charge, and her bail was $10,000 at 100%. So we were able to bail Cindy out, and Cindy is now home. She was incarcerated for over a month at the time that we had bonded her out. And then we have Ladarius, who was 17 years old. And so that's Ladarius. Those were the two bails that we had done. So that's the work in Prince George's County, and I'll move us on to Baltimore. Baltimore is a little different than what we've been doing across in DC and in Prince George's County. We've been coming across some very hardships and some obstacles to try to bail folks out in Baltimore. So in March, the state's attorney, Marilyn Mosby, recommended that the court release 114 folks that were awaiting trial, and that over 1,800 folks were actually being held at the Baltimore Detention Center. So that measly 114 was just not enough. So what happened is the Advocates Out for Justice, who was our coalition partner in Baltimore, on March the 30th, they were able to hold a statewide call to release hundreds of women in Baltimore Detention Center. And on April the 30th, OFJ will be hosting a Facebook and Instagram Live, and I'll see if we can send that information out to everybody that's on the call, where OFJ will be collaborating with folks from behind the wall and have them call in and share their stories with OFJ in this this town hall. Baltimore was also able to uniquely bail out 3 women who we did not use money to bail them out. They were actually able to file a motion, and this motion was a motion for immediate release based on COVID-19 issues, and to prove that they were not a threat to the public and that they would come to court. And the strategies that they used for release was basically to call and put pressure on the state's attorney's office to recall warrants and to demand that lower level offenses would not they would not be recommending bail for lower level offenses. So they've been really pushing in Baltimore. Shout out to Nicole from Out for Justice, who's really been pushing the state's attorney's office around making sure that they're doing more than they're saying. Because what we're noticing with our state's attorney and being a part of the Mass Liberation Project, we are noticing that the state's attorneys are trying to become heroes, and they're riding the backs of our advocacy and trying to, put it out there like they're the ones doing the work, and they're putting out these numbers, and folks don't really have a way to follow up with them. So it's really important that the advocates are with the activists and the folks that are on the ground are actually holding them accountable in a real way. Because if not, then we'll have a lot of things that are going on, like Larry Krasner and Marilyn Mosby making these statements, and Aisha Braveboy as well, making these statements to seem as if they're progressive and that they're doing all this work, when in actuality, if the work is being done, it's usually by the hands of the public defenders or the advocates on the ground. One of the highlights from Baltimore is, like I said, is that 3 mamas have been released. And one of them is receiving rental support from OFJ, and OFJ has this really nice housing plan, and they're also working to release juveniles as well. And there's a nice picture of Nicole. Shout out to Nicole over here in the corner. So who are we targeting with our advocacy? We are targeting state's attorneys. We're targeting, everybody can get that smoke, right? The state's attorney can get the smoke. The mayors need to get that smoke. The sheriffs need to get the smoke. And we also have the unique position of the U.S. Attorney General, who is Carl Racine here in the Washington, D.C. area. And then we have Hogan over here with his mask on, that probably was made by somebody that's incarcerated. So we are here to say that all of them can get the smoke. So if you're trying to develop campaigns here in your jurisdiction, these are the folks that you need to be looking at. These are the folks that are locking our folks up in cages. These are the folks that are making these press releases and these press conferences saying that they're doing the job of releasing folks when they're really not. So when we call to free them all, these are the folks that we are calling out to. We have Aisha Braveboy over here. She is the state's attorney for Prince George's County. We have Marilyn Mosby, who is the state's attorney for Baltimore City. We have Mayor Muriel Bowser, who is the mayor for Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. And we have Carl Racine, who is the U.S. attorney over here in our far right. We have Melvin High, who is our sheriff. And what we're noticing is that we can get people free, but then the sheriff's office is going behind and locking folks up on the most craziest things. As we were getting folks free, we were seeing people that were coming in, taking out orders to get folks released. That's the sheriff's office that are executing those warrants. So that's why the sheriff's office needs to get that smoke as well. So to end it all we're doing is trying to win, trying to get our folks free. So far during the COVID season, we were able to bail out 7 of our loved ones. And just here's a little note from us. Earlier today, we just bailed out 2 more folks from the jail. And here's a little video. Oops, I gotta go back. How do I go back? Okay, here we go.
Because they got our loved ones in cages in the COVID hell. We here for freedom because Black Lives Matter. And it's money keeping them here, but love gonna bring them home. So we got our bondsmen over here. It's not a bondsman because they ain't gonna owe us no money. We friend them with love. We got a $500 bond and a $300. We have 49 cases of COVID in this. We wait for our people to get out. And we're gonna roll out when we know that they safe. say they free. We got to get their freedom papers. So we wait for those freedom papers so we can leave. Freedom papers. We over here getting freedom papers. Y'all stay safe. Stay in the house. We have to stay in the house. And tell them to decarcerate DC, decarcerate PG. Free them all. Free them all.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, free them all, free them all. So in addition to bailing folks out, our people need service. Our people need us, right? In a mutual way. We have also we're also doing mutual aid in each one of our jurisdictions so that we can help our folks once they are released. We're giving out hygiene, personal care. We're doing court support still via virtual, connecting to folks virtually on Saturdays. We're providing up to $25 worth of groceries, baby milk, Pampers. We are doing basic rapid response in DC as well. We're doing cop watch. So we're riding around making sure that the police ain't out here locking folks up and doing fuck shit. So we are also doing cop watch with Black Lives Matter DC. And then over here in Baltimore, they're also providing hygiene products, legal services, and housing and food. So that is how Free Black Mamas is bailing folks out during this COVID season as we're ramping up to get ready to bail folks out for Mama's Day. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much, Kiana. Thank you for these visuals and all of this fineness that you've shown us and how y'all do the work out in the DMV. And also shout out to Mimi, shout out to all of y'all and like getting the freedom papers for our people. And so thank you, thank you. So I am going to pass it now to Nick from Michigan Liberation, who is going to talk about the work that they are doing in advocacy and using the bailouts as a tactic out in Detroit. What up, though?
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Big shout out to Kiana for that presentation. And yeah, what's good, everybody? As we say out here in Detroit, if you're not from Detroit, it's a big difference from Michigan. We like to say, what up, though? So as you come into the city of Detroit, get you a pair of buffs, eat you some coney fries with some cheese on it, sliced cheese, please, and just say, what up, though? My name is Nicholas Buckingham. Please call me Nick. And I am the campaign director for Michigan Liberation, and we are a organization that is statewide, solely focused on criminal legal issues. We are an organization that so hardly believe that those who are closest to the problem are definitely closest to the solution, but farthest from resources and power. And with that, being said, a lot of our folks that are leading the movement with Michigan Liberation and just throughout Michigan, period, one, we try to make sure that it's coming from the voice of the formerly incarcerated, and or those who have been impacted by crime. Or who are just survivors, period. Myself spent 7 years incarcerated here in Michigan for armed robbery and really got in tune with this work while I was incarcerated to do a campaign to lower the cost of the phone calls. And so just, happy to bring this work home with me and to continue to do it. With our bailout, we started our bailout last year. And it was like really after we formed this organization. So we started the organization at the later end of 2018. A lot of directly impacted folks that really wanted to get together and start to change the system and just couldn't get down with a lot of the grass tops and white led movements, especially when it comes down to abolition and not being able to go and get the people that we wanted to get out of jail. So one of our first projects that we took on as an org was the Black Mother's Day bailout. And when we before we started this organization, we were somewhere else, and we attempted to do this bailout. And there was a young mom whose baby fell through the floor. It was like a rundown house here in Detroit, but her baby, very young, fell through this floor and drowned in a puddle of water in the basement. And our prosecutor wanted to do more harm by incarcerating this mom. And so the community got together, raised money, and we wanted to go get this young mom out of jail. We would fought with a lot of opposition, with an organization telling us that they would never support, us wanting to support the harm of a child. And we couldn't rock with that. So we created Michigan Liberation and tried this attempt again, refunded everybody their money back and went right back at it. And one thing about the city of Detroit is our community. One of the largest, last standing Black communities in the nation. And poverty is very evident from the west side all the way to the east side. The city of Detroit, a community where over 100 schools was closed down in 1 year because of lack of funding. But there's a $500 million jail that's being built right in the center of the hood in Detroit. So when we talk about school to prison pipeline, our children have an opportunity to walk out their front door and see a $500 million jail being constructed right there in their backyard. So it's a huge slap in the face for a lot of the Black citizens here in Detroit. But the bailout has been, an answer to a lot of the issues that's been going on in our way of doing political pressure towards our prosecutor and other stakeholders. So what I want to do, I'm going to share my screen and show you all just a quick PowerPoint of how we were able to take our bailout and start to focus more on bigger campaigns and really like start to craft out a statewide platform to overhaul the criminal legal system. And again, I think like following the same steps as many other people doing this bailout of wanting to get into coalition with other groups. So one of the first things we did was we started to reach out to a lot of the other groups, mainly those who try to organize in the lands of abolition, and start to pitch this idea that, one, we want to raise money, we want to raise grassroots money, but we also want to go into the jails and start to bail out as many Black moms that we possibly can. And what sounds like a really great idea, it is, to connect these moms, to do it on Mother's Day, to connect them with their family, to connect them to, resources and support to help them fight their cases in court and hopefully like not enter into the prison system. So, we quickly got a group of folks together, a lot of orgs that jumped on us, a lot of reentry organizations, other organizations that were just doing base building. And we were also able to connect with like one of the dopest churches here in Detroit, which is the Church of the Messiah. Not your traditional, average Christian church, but with all of us, just crafting out this idea of bailing folks out and what this would look like for us. So we started to do it. Over a time span, we were able to bail out roughly about 15 moms, and we did this in 3 different counties. We were able to do it in Wayne County, Oakland County, and Kalamazoo. And like each county is so much different from the other. Oakland County, if you have an opportunity like to just kind of Google these different counties, but it's one of the most richest counties in the nation. But when we look at their jail population, the majority of the folks that's sleeping on the beds in these jails are Black. And it's the same for like Wayne County, where the makeup of Wayne County is majority white. But when we look into our county jails, the majority of the folks that's sitting in our county jail is Black. And one of the fastest growing populations in our county jail is Black moms, Black women, period. And we're looking at like these different cases of like how do people get caught up and trapped inside of the jail and can't pay their bond. And we honestly was thinking like we're going to run into people that have these serious messed up cases, murder or shooting or things like that. But over like 60% of the people that are sitting inside of Wayne County Jail, they're there because of traffic violations. So we have this reputation as being one of the most dangerous cities in the nation, but when we look at our jail population, it is literally like overcrowded with folks because they can't pay bond due to traffic violations, due to high cost of insurance rates and things like that. So we started to run into a lot of nuances with pretrial services. We started to run into a lot of nuances with judges, but the most important person we've been running into is our prosecutors. And when we started to think about like how, if we want to reduce the incarceration rate here in Michigan, not only in our jails and our prisons, but we also want to stop this criminalization of Black people in our impacted neighborhoods, who is the one person that we really need to go after? And it's our prosecutor. So from this Black Mothers Bailout, we were able to one, bail people out, to disrupt the system, especially around pretrial services. We started doing a lot of base building. During our bailout, we were able to do some court watching, which we had an opportunity to partner with University of Michigan law students and some other kick-ass attorneys across Michigan. And then, from there, just doing listening sessions that, were coming from the moms that we bailed out. We were getting into the community. We were going into the churches, and we really wanted to hear from folks. One, how do you feel about your prosecutor? But overall, how do you feel about the criminal legal system? From those listening sessions, we were able to do a canvassing project in these three different counties, knocking over 30,000 doors in 5 weeks, with a very small team, a team less than like 10 people, across the entire state. And when we were doing this canvassing, again, just asking those questions about how do you feel about your prosecutor? Do you know how your prosecutor get in the positions of power? And if you had that magic wand, and you can wave it right now, what are those things that you would change in the criminal legal system? And like the results, the data was so overwhelming. It was through the roof. We couldn't do nothing else but design to create a campaign from there. Um, in that campaign, it became this 8-month process of all these listening sessions and talking to these justice impacted people. But this agenda that we were able to create, from the voices, when I say 120% of our statewide agenda comes from the community that we organize, I'm not over exaggerating. It was like in our values that anybody that was on staff with Michigan Liberation would not have a say so to how this agenda is produced, would not have a say so to the language that is used in this agenda. And it comes from that community of both folks that have been directly impacted by the legal system and also survivors of violence and survivors of crime, and bringing these communities together, and not to leave out my wrongfully convicted folks as well, but bringing these communities together to say, these are the things that we want to see done to overhaul the criminal legal system here in Michigan. So when we created this, I'm not sure if you all are able to see this box, so let me close it. So yeah, when we created this agenda, and what you're looking at right now is like these were the bullet points that we were starting with. So what you see 1 through 8, these were like the issues that was coming up a lot in our listening sessions in our community. Folks wanted to talk a lot about the school to prison pipeline, police and surveillance, mental health, sentencing, reentry, so forth and so on. And when we started to craft out what this agenda would look like, we didn't want to use this oppressive language, like school to prison pipeline is oppressive, saying police and surveillance is oppressive, pretrial, sir, all of that shit is oppressive. So we moved into the language of the community. And when we think about school to prison pipeline, we really want, our governor, our state, and our stakeholders to think about the freedom for our children to thrive. Police and surveillance is all about community determined public safety. Like, we don't need the police to talk about what safety looks like in our community. Mental health, we don't like to use that terminology. And a lot of times, like, folks that's dealing with mental health or mental illness, they're criminalized, right? So we want to talk more about what that care looks like and not the criminalization. Pretrial service is a direct service to like more slavery, and so that's things that we want to end. So yeah, I'm not going to like just go through each one of these, but on this next slide, um, this, like, our platform is pretty big, it's pretty huge, and I know you all probably can't read the small writings that's on each one of these slides. And if I have time, like, I can share this with this group in an email. But when we put this together, like I said, this our community, 120% of it comes from them. So just keeping everything in this original form as this community continue to work through this living document and putting that overhaul on the system, right? So as we're moving, we're in 2020 now. COVID-19 has disrupted a lot of things with our campaign, especially around our prosecutor. But we're still putting fire into the prosecutor right now today. What you're looking at right now is like a small template of our prosecutor platform. We're tweaking it right now so that it can be in response to the COVID-19 and what's happening inside our jails. So to wrap this up, where we're at with our campaign, one, we've raised a lot of money. We've been doing some bailouts here in Wayne County. So far, we've bailed out 6 people from the county jail. Unfortunately, they're not in our priority of Black moms, but they are Black folks that did not need to be locked away in our cages. Our prosecutor has come on a record to say that they have cleaned out the jail, and there's only about 900 or so people left in the jail right now. And that the reason that these people cannot get out of the jail is because they are charged with felony convictions. In translation, what does that mean to the public? Felony convictions are, deemed as people that are very violent. They are a threat to the community. Myself, like I said earlier, I went to prison for armed robbery, so I fall into that category. But what we're learning as we're coming through the list is that a lot of these people have felonies because they are failure to report a court, child support, and things like that. We're working with a defense attorney group that are getting people bonds lowered down to about $5 right now, and we're going in there and we're getting our people and we're bringing them home. But we're also raising up this narrative that just because a person is charged with a felony does not mean that this person is violent to a community or a society. So we don't need reentry. We don't need the police. The community is doing this. We're bringing our folks home. We're going to do leadership development and really work with this community and get our prosecutor replaced. So
Yes,
thank you all.
yes. Thank you so much, Nick, for that bomb-ass presentation and like highlighting all the tactics and tools that y'all are using out in Detroit, and really highlighting the need to support formerly incarcerated leadership and general leadership development, and also highlighting like that false dichotomy again between like violent and nonviolent and who's deserving. And really, so yeah, really appreciate that. And also just like calling attention to this moment that we're in, especially as we're seeing mass releases, that we know that like there's still judgment calls being made about who deserves to be released, that is based on all these white supremacist tactics such as felonies and high bonds and all of those other things. So really appreciate you. And folks have asked whether or not they could get that bond PowerPoint. And we can definitely, with your permission, send that out in the notes as well. But really appreciate the work that y'all are doing out in Detroit. And I am going to pass it last but definitely not least to Leslie out in Nevada. So we're gonna take it to the West Coast. So we hit the East, then West, now we're going a little further west to Las Vegas to talk about the work that y'all are doing out there.
Hey y'all, welcome to the West Side, the best side, no, just kidding. Hey everybody, I'm Leslie. I am organizer with Mass Liberation Project, which I want to shout out Nick and Kiana because they are also Mass Lib. We created Mass Liberation together. We were the original members. So I want to just say, we still out here doing that. So that's all good. So we started out, and I apologize. And just a heads up, my internet is real janky. So I'm gonna do my best. If you can't hear me, give me a signal so I can pause. So we started out doing prosecutorial accountability. We got into the work and then we immediately kicked it off to the DA's race. And it took a lot of political education in the community to let folks know that, the DA holds power over our community, holds power over our people, and there is a reason why we're targeting him. So in the midst of that, DA's race, we started doing the Mother's Day bailout. We bailed out our first mama, and we were like, yeah, she need a job. She's about to be working on the DA's race with us. So she just got thrown right into the mix. And from there, it was just like a lot of political education. And we really center a lot of our work around political education because that's what's lacking in our community is we don't understand a lot of the structural racism that impacts us on a daily basis. So just like really making sure our people understand that, and that just trying to dismantle all of that indoctrination that comes from white supremacy. And so from there, she was working with us on the DA's race, and now she's actually leading work in St. Louis, so East St. Louis. So shout out Tierra. And so when we first got into the DA's race, our candidate was really talking about ending money bail. And so ending money bail was a concept that was not really being talked about in Nevada at all. And although we were not successful, we didn't get the win in that DA's race, we were able to really shift public narrative, which is also really important when you're trying to move anything, is really thinking about what is the public perception on concepts that impact us, but we don't control how people view them. Like public safety, for instance. So like really just like redefining public safety, redefining what we need in our community, what keeps us safe, like Nick was saying. And from there, shifting the narrative, we were able to build a campaign around ending money bail. So like, even though we didn't get that win in the DA's race, we used the momentum, the base that we built and the narrative to really craft this concept that we are going to actually end money bail, which has now shifted to, ending pretrial detention in general. So from there, from our ending money bail campaign, we had formerly incarcerated people, including myself, other folks at the table writing the actual bill. A lot of us, this is my first time even being in a legislative process, my first time reading an actual bill and understanding how it becomes a law. So like, don't ever think that you can't get this knowledge, you cannot do this work, you cannot write laws. We all can do it, and we're doing it. So we sat at that table, we wrote a bill that it didn't end money bail, but it was a reformist reform, as Marbury said. It was a first step towards decriminalizing our people. So we lost that battle too. So we did not pass that bill in the legislature. But what we did do is we forced the state to look at pretrial detention in depth. So there was an interim commission that was created out of that process. And then we were able to also pass the Justice Reinvestment Bill, which forced the state to invest money into the communities, which we're still working on to make sure that the money goes to where it needs to go. But that bill that we did pass was basically created a committee to really do an in-depth analysis of the pretrial justice system. And then in the midst of that, on April 9th, the Supreme Court entered a decision because we did kind of like legislative advocacy as well, legal advocacy, where we filed lawsuits alongside ACLU and Civil Rights Court. And through that lawsuit, the Supreme Court entered a decision on April 9th, saying that that basically everything that we asked for in our bill, our original bill that we put forth that didn't go through, that all of those things were actually constitutional. And so now they're the law, per the Supreme Court. So that basically changed bail in Nevada to now a person has to have a hearing on bail affordability, whether or not they even have the financial means to pay that amount. The state now has to actually prove through an evidentiary hearing whether or not, they can't just say this person is a public safety risk. They have to prove it in court. So those are two steps towards, ending money bail, and it definitely built power for our community. And so now we're using that to get people out in the midst of COVID-19. So there are so many people in jails, and Nevada is very conservative historically, so they're not really interested in freeing people right now. So we really have to apply a lot of pressure. We have to do a lot of advocacy. We have to get creative, figure out how to do things digitally. But now we're sending motions inside to incarcerated people to be able to self-file to get access to that bail hearing that they were supposed to have now based on the new Supreme Court ruling. And what that's going to do is going to force the system to buckle, because they're not going to be able to keep up with all of those motions. And so they're going to have to start releasing people based on the pressure and the buildup. So we've already seen our first kind of wave of releases. The sheriff agreed to release 10% of the population in the city jail. So in the county jail. So we're still pushing that because it's way more people than 10% that need to get out. And then at the same time, we're pushing the governor and the Nevada Sentencing Commission, which has jurisdiction to convene the pardons board. We're pressuring them. I just came out of a 3-hour meeting with them earlier this morning, trying to get them to come up with just a plan. How are you going to release as a part of your mitigation with COVID-19? So that's pretty much it. The bailouts, I just want to kind of circle back. This is our 3rd year doing bailouts. The first year, we bailed out a mama and Wait, is my internet still good, y'all? Okay. All right, cool. The first year we bailed out a mama, and like I said, she's doing this work. She's beast mode. Tiara, I think she's on the call. And then the second year, I think we bailed. Oh yeah, we did. We bailed out 3 mamas, and they disappeared on us. They were like, we don't want no. We love y'all, thank you, but like we're not about to do all this work. And so we were at the same time able to coordinate for another organizer who's beast mode on the call right now, hopefully. We were able to organize. She was getting released at the same time, so we were able to organize and get her to be part of the fellowship. And now she's also doing the work. And like I said, everyone that we try to bail out, we try to really just do that deep political education, just about, really just activating things that people already know, like in skills that they already have. If you're Black in America, you're an organizer, period. Like you've
We don't hear you, Leslie. We know you kicking knowledge and we can't hear it.
and we're just trying to support where, oh, wait. Dang.
We heard you say period.
Okay. Dang, I had a good stretch there. But no, I'll wrap up by saying that we're doing COVID-19, obviously, lots of advocacy. We're raising money. We're paying for people's housing. There's a housing crisis just like everywhere. 90% of the people who are bailing out don't have anywhere to go. So we're paying for rooms. We're paying, programs. They're charging us, taxing us, charging us deposits. But we're raising money for that, and we're doing that work. And so basically, the bailout is tied to the campaign in the sense that it really, like, we got to be freeing our people. We got to be helping our people. Like when Kiana's talking about mutual aid, like we cannot do this advocacy work if we're not addressing people's needs right now, and our people are in cages right now and they need to get out right now. So that is a tactic that's always going to be used. And then it also amplifies and illustrates exactly what it is we're talking about. Like, we're not just saying this is happening to our people, we're showing you that it's happening to our people. And then it also allows us to identify issues that we didn't know about. Like, just for instance, we bailed out a woman, she actually had house arrest. And so we didn't even necessarily.
Your volume again. Your volume again. The devil is busy, Leslie. The devil is busy.
Sorry, y'all. I don't know. Can y'all hear me yet? No. Oh, you can hear me? Okay. I'll try to wrap it up before my internet goes out again. I'm sorry. Just really quick. We identified that house arrest is being denied because people lived in weeklies. And we found that out through bailing people out. And so we're able to advocate for that. So the bailouts illuminate deeper issues that you don't know that are going on that are related to bail, which are the bail code, the bail codes, which, MBO was leading on. So I'll pass it off. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Leslie. Yes. Thank you for all of the dope work that you are doing out in the West Coast. I'm not sure about the Best Coast, but definitely the work that you are doing out in the West Coast. And also just being a model for what leadership development looks like and how you brought folks in that you built out or who have been coming out of cages. So really, really thank you, Leslie. And thank all of our lovely panelists, Leslie, Kiana, Nick, and Mar, for sharing all the richness and the knowledge and the wisdom that our bailouts have brought through, or that our bailouts have confirmed. So really, really appreciate all of y'all. And Ms. Betty from SE has told us that the West Coast is the best coast. So shout out to, all of it. So want to just leave some room if folks have any questions Any thoughts? Now is the time, y'all. While folks may be formulating some questions, and folks can raise their hand on the Zoom function under participants, and folks can also put it in the chat. But just want to remind folks, and by saying that this webinar is part of our series. It has been going on for the past 3 weeks, and shout out to those of you who have been rocking with us since the beginning. But next week, we will be having a troubleshooting webinar where we'll be back here for those of you who are doing bailouts, who just want some answers to all of the foolishness that I'm sure folks are definitely experiencing, and the challenges and barriers to releasing folks. So we're going to be back here with some organizers and some of our legal friends to discuss how to get our folks free in integrity. And we're also going to, so that's next week here, 6 o'clock, May 6th. And then May 13th, we're going to have our final webinar, which is the recap webinar. And that's just going to talk about all of this work that y'all are hearing today, including the work of others who wasn't able to make it, but really talk about the work that of the bailouts during COVID-19 and Black Mama's bailout. So come back here Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern for a recap. And if folks have any questions or information, our panelists can put their emails in the chat box currently, or folks can reach out to us at info@nationalbailout.org, and y'all can get all of the information that y'all need. And we'll definitely be sending out the recording of this webinar, in addition to notes in the presentations that were shared today for your use. And we again encourage folks to download our toolkit, which touches on our framework at National Bailout and some of our values, and also the advocacy work that can be plugged into and utilized as part of this tactic at nationalbailout.org. And we are super grateful for y'all, super grateful that y'all spent this Wednesday evening with us. And we will definitely be in touch. So happy Wednesday, y'all. Bye.